Isn't it pathetic, the kind of weak evidence that the religious present? I mean, who would actually believe any of this in the first place? Oh, right, the dumb people that believe in these religions. And today, we're going to dive right back into that cesspool because, somebody asked me to. Jeez, the things I do for you people, seriously. Here we go with another recommended video, this time sent in by Guy the Incognito. This is one of those videos made just for the people who like to listen and not watch because, honestly, there is absolutely nothing going on screen. So if you want to step away and go do something else, trust me, you're not missing a thing. This video was made by Jargon, and it's supposed to be the best evidence for God. I'm sorry, but if this is the best you've got, it's time to get back to the drawing board because we're going to take this whole mess apart and show why it's not only terrible, it actually proves just how irrational the religious are for considering any of this at all. Not that that's really any surprise, mind you, but we keep circling around to why the religious have no good reason to think that any of their beliefs are true. So thanks to Guy, and let's get going.
Okay, so I wanted to do a little video. It's not going to be very long, but it's one of the best evidences of God, or the best, probably, is, of course, creation itself.
And if that's the best you can do, give up now because that's laughable at best. Because here's the thing, you're just assuming that there was a creation period. And that's not demonstrated. That's just an assertion that you'd have to prove using objectively verifiable evidence first, and good luck on that. Because this is the kind of thing that we see all the time. It doesn't matter if you believe it. It doesn't matter if you have faith in it. It doesn't matter if it really makes you feel good to think that it's true. It matters only what you can prove, and I don't think you can prove a thing. Now, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he thinks that he can prove that, and I will certainly give him the time that he needs to go ahead and do that. But the proof isn't what you have faith in. It isn't what it says in your book. It isn't what you want to be true. It's got to be objective, scientific, in this case, factual and empirical evidence that what you're claiming is actually true in the real world. And I think we all know that can't be done. So, by all means, if you think you can, go right ahead and demonstrate it to us that there was a creation in the first place. Because this ought to be good.
And because you can't have an infinite regress of physical causes.
And how do you know that exactly? I mean, this is an honest question. We understand that within our own particular instantiation of space-time, that does seem to be the case. But what about what happens beyond it? Because if you're talking about the origin of our universe, then the physical laws that apply within it, those can't be relied on to operate in the same way. Yes, it is possible that there are no other ways that they could exist, but that's not something that can be demonstrated, and thus we can't just pretend that's automatically the case in order to make your argument. So now you've put yourself in a position where, at least I hope, we both agree that you'd have to demonstrate the ultimately indemonstrable. And that's really not a good position to be in.
Because every physical thing has a cause. Everything is caused by something else. It's called contingency.
So, what caused your God? Because what you're doing right here is just special pleading, which is one of the many logical fallacies that the religious love to use. Everything needs X except Y. Well, why does Y get an exception? Because they want Y to have an exception. That's why. It's a matter of faith, not fact. Well, why does Y get that exception? Because I am not going to take your faith on faith. How do you demonstrate that objectively? And if Y can have that exception, well, why not A, B, C, and D? Because they just don't want that to happen, that's why. This is exactly what happens to these terrible religious arguments the second that you start to deconstruct them. They all completely start to fall apart. They're all based on feelings and wishful thinking, and there are no facts or evidence apparent. They have a conclusion that they are desperate to reach, and therefore they just made up a lot of ideas along the way, things that might even sound reasonable if you don't think about them too much, just so they can get back to their blind faith, because that's really all that they care about. But that's not how reason or rationality work. Not that these people really seem to care.
Everything is contingent on something else, but you can't have an infinite regress of contingency.
Then what is God contingent on? Because any answer that you give, why can't that apply equally well to the universe? I mean, these are honest questions that the religious have no actual answers for, and they don't really care. Well, God's eternal. Okay, how do you know that? Better yet, how do you prove that? Where did you get the idea, and how have you objectively verified it to show that it's actually correct? Because we all know that they haven't, because we all know that they don't really care. And that's why all of these religious ideas completely disintegrate the second that you give them more than a passing glance. And you know the only people who ever do that? Yeah, it isn't the Christians. It's the people who they are ostensibly trying to convince that their imaginary friends are real. That's why they don't really get anywhere. And that's why these videos aren't really made for us.
Or an infinite regress of physical causes. And that right there is your evidence of God.
And how does that work exactly? Because this is all just a load of complete gobbledygook. But that's how God is. Okay, how do you know that? I know that's what you believe. I know that's what you've been told. I know that's what it says in your big book of multiple choice. But just because a book says a thing, that doesn't mean that it's true. How do you actually know that? And this is why faith doesn't actually get you anywhere useful. Faith is an excuse in self-delusion and confirmation bias. You think it's true because it makes you feel good to think that it's true. None of that means that it's actually true. And this is another problem that the religious face. How do they know anything about the actual characteristics of their deities? How did they test it to see if it stood up to any kind of critical scrutiny? Well, that's just how God is. Great. How do you know that? How do you prove it? Well, I can't prove it. That's just how it is. Yeah, I don't believe you, and nobody else ought to either. And this is why these people aren't really talking to us, because we're not going to take them at their word. We're going to expect them to do more. We're going to expect them to show their work. And they can't do that, because they're not doing any work. They're just exercising faith.
Because it has to be a cause that's not contingent. It's not physical. It has to be supernatural.
Then go right ahead and prove that the supernatural exists in the first place. Define what it is first. Not what it's not, what it is. What is it made of? How does it operate? What demonstrable rules does it follow? Because, let's be honest, to the religious, the word supernatural is just a label for everything they can't understand. Well, I don't get it, so it's got to be supernatural. No, that just means you don't get it. This brings us right back to the fallacy fail train and the argument from personal incredulity. Just because you really like the idea, that doesn't make the idea true. You don't just get to insert your own emotionally comforting rationalizations because you just don't like the idea of not having an immediate answer. That is childish. It's also the fundamental core of religious faith. Do we understand where this is a problem? Well, we do. They, unfortunately, they don't seem to.
So it's clear evidence that there is a God. And of course, he's not silent. He hasn't been silent. He has made his word known. And it's just a matter of, hello, Doki, how you doing? Just a matter of facing the facts, even in physics.
Yeah, demonstrate any of that, please. Any at all. Because this is really where they go completely off the reservation, because this is just wishful thinking speaking, not evidence. How do they know that any of that is true? God isn't silent. Well, says who? Because I haven't heard from him in any demonstrable way. Oh, somebody wrote a book? Lots of people write books. That doesn't mean that God was involved in any of them. The Muslims have a book that they think proves Allah. So do the Hindus and a lot of other religions. Books don't prove anything other than people write books. You've got to do a whole lot better than that. Again, this is where you have to slink back to faith because they don't have anything else. Well, God talks to me. No, you've just got a mental problem. Seek professional help. Because this is where they seem to have issues because they can never understand that interpreting some event as God, that doesn't mean it was God. You have to do a whole lot better than that. And they never can. Not once, not ever.
You can't have energy making itself or causing itself.
And nobody ever says that except you people, because nobody ever says that energy makes itself otherwise. This is where ignorance comes in. People like this, sorry, but clearly they don't have any advanced degrees in physics and the like. I'm not even sure they made it at a high school because, yeah, this is just dumb. They don't actually have a clue what it is that they're talking about. They heard this from other ignorant people and they just keep spouting it because it gets them to the emotional goal that they really want to reach. The thing is that anybody can do this, anyone at all. If you derive emotional comfort from the idea that Bigfoot is out in the woods somewhere, well, you can say the exact same thing. Bigfoot talks to me in my dreams. No, you're crazy. You have problems upstairs and you need to get that looked after. But how do these people know that it's God, or Bigfoot for that matter? They don't. They're just interpreting it in a way that makes them happy, not that stands up to any kind of skeptical rigor. You believe it because you want to believe it, not because you can demonstrate that it's anywhere remotely close to true. And that's the problem with religion right there. You can't actually prove anything, period. They just want to believe.
Everything comes from a greater cause or a more powerful cause. And you can't have an infinite regress of more powerful causes. That's your evidence of God. But the skeptics, they don't want to go there. They don't want to consider that.
Because it's not demonstrably true. This is a horrible misunderstanding of reality, done because, let's be honest, reality scares the bejesus out of these people. Therefore, they just make stuff up, or they just buy into the nonsense that other people have made up, designed to soothe their feelings and make things a little less frightening. It's just not true. And that's kind of a problem when you think about it. Because guess what? Reality is what it is. Whether it's scary or not, it's still real. You don't have to like it because nobody cares if you do. You just have to deal with it. And refusing to do so, as the religious do, that just makes them idiots. It's like the people who get terminal cancer and run around looking for all kinds of nonsensical alternative cures. None of them work, and surprise, surprise, they still die. What did all of this actually do for them? I mean, demonstrably. And the answer is nothing. Nothing at all. They just wasted whatever time they had left and all the money that they just threw away on things that didn't do a thing for them. Just like religion. Think about it. Somebody should.
Because, of course, they have ulterior motives. They want to be able to make their own decisions and do whatever they want to do without God influencing their decision.
Oh, right. We just want to sin. Do you not understand just how stupid that sounds? Because this is, again, just a bald rationalization. It's making things up to alleviate your own discomfort at the real world that surrounds you. These people want everybody to believe what they do. It's far too uncomfortable otherwise, so when faced with the undesirable reality that an ever-increasing number of people just don't buy into their stupid religious crap, they just make things up. No, we don't believe it because there's no good reason to think any of it is true. You believe for bad reasons. You believe for emotional reasons. You don't have any evidence, and your understanding of the real world, that leaves a lot to be desired. Think about it. I mean, really, think. It doesn't hurt that much.
They want to be free to do what they want to do. But freedom is in God. Freedom's in Christ. God came to set us free.
Then why are you a slave to your religious faith? Because there's no freedom in the Bible. You might want to actually read it sometime because it's clear that you have no idea what it actually says. Most Christians don't. The Bible doesn't teach freedom. It teaches servitude. It says, at least according to some interpretations, that you're going to spend all of eternity kissing God's ass. How is that freedom? It's a very weird definition of the word, if you ask me. You spend all of your time on earth, something that the Bible teaches is irrelevant and is going to be discarded like dirty rags, so that you can get to heaven and be a slave forever. Where is this freedom exactly? Point it out to me because I'm just not seeing it.
The truth will set us free. So what they think is freedom is not freedom, and what they think is slavery is not slavery. God came to set us free. He's going to set everybody free. God bless everybody with the truth of God's word.
Yeah, how about you demonstrate that for us? I mean, at least try. Do more than flap your lips. Actually show us that any of this is factually correct with evidence. Of course, he won't because he can't, and that's kind of the thing. They don't actually care. Because I've seen plenty of discussions with the religious where the second that you start going over all of these questions, they start to get pretty mad. They don't want to consider the realistic ramifications of their beliefs. They just want to believe. Well, wanting to believe isn't a good reason for actually believing. I mean, this guy is barely coherent, but he's really not saying anything that different from William Lane Craig or the other big name apologists. They might be using bigger words, but they're not making any better points. How do you know, and how did you test it to see if you were actually right? Come back when you have intelligent answers to those questions. Because every time I ask that to a theist, surprise, surprise, I never see them again. It's kind of funny how that works, isn't it?
Only our Creator can save us. He's the only one able to recreate us or fix all of our problems, from the inside out, starting from the heart.
Save us from what exactly? Because every single problem that we supposedly have, didn't God cause those in the first place, at least according to your mythology? Because if you actually read the Bible, there's really no other way to see it. God behaved like a primitive, immature child because he was invented by primitive, immature children. Then, a while later, people decided that really wasn't the kind of God they wanted to follow, so they just made another one up and tried desperately to link the new with the old. And that's why there's such a distinct difference between the God of the Old Testament and the God of the New. For thousands of years, people have been tweaking God. That's why there are more than 42,000 distinct sects of Christianity, not to mention all of the thousands and thousands and thousands of other religions out there. Everybody has their own version of God, cherry-picking the parts that they want and ignoring the parts that they don't. Seriously, how these people can't understand that, I will never know. They've got a lot of real problems to face, and they just don't want to.
He's concerned with matters of the heart. He wants to fix our heart, which is the most important thing, and the physical things can come later, or the resurrection, the physical resurrection.
First off, the heart isn't that important unless you have some high cholesterol and high blood pressure issues. I understand what they mean, but it still makes me wonder just how ignorant these people actually are. But again, all of these supposed problems, they are problems that God caused in the first place. How could we be anything but perfect if God is perfect and God can only make perfection? How did God not see all of this coming? Because, as we've shown before, the Bible is a long, sad list of God's utter failures. He should have known better. He's running around trying to patch up all the bugs just like a modern-day game designer, and that just makes him look like a pathetic, ignorant fool that doesn't deserve our respect or our admiration in the first place. So why do you people like this thing? Oh, right, because God terrifies you. That's what all of this comes down to. Fear. How absurd is that?
But the most important thing right now is our heart, how we respond, how we react to God. God bless, take care, everybody, and stay in God.
Yeah, no thanks. I'm happy with reality. Because videos like this just show us how weak the religious position is. Not just Christianity, but all of them. They're all doing the exact same thing. They're all seeking unearned emotional comfort because they're terrified to just stand there on their own 2 feet. God is just Santa Claus for adults who just can't manage to grow the hell up. If you're good and you believe hard enough, well, you're gonna get presents. Except that never demonstrably happens, does it? Religion, particularly Christianity, conveniently withholds the presents until you're dead and you can't come back to tell anybody else that there's nothing actually there. That's what marks this as a scam, which, of course, all religion is. This is why we have to be very, very critical of all of these claims, because the claims just don't stand up to any measure of intellectual scrutiny. This was a pretty simple video to take on, and again, thank you to Guy the Incognito for suggesting it. But the reason we take on these simplistic videos is because it's easier to see the absurdity behind it all. Because once the big words and the bombastic sentiments get swept away, what's left over is what's actually behind the religion. This kind of thing is the core of Christianity, and it is not remotely impressive. It's only bought into by people who just don't have a critical bone in their bodies, and that's just sad. It really is. Because no rational adult should ever fall for any of this. All of the problems that I've pointed out should spring immediately to mind, but these people are not rational adults, at least not when it comes to their religious beliefs. Because religion, whether you like it or not, religion is a mind poison. It does this to people. It makes people believe things for no good reason, and then it penalizes them for even daring to ask any questions. And if this is the best that any of you can come up with, I think you all need to go back to the drawing board, because this is not going to impress anyone, at least not anyone with a brain. Because really, this shouldn't impress you either, and I don't understand why it does.